Okay.
And we are live.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Astrid Caldas. I am a senior climate scientist for community resilience at the Union of Concerned Scientists, which is a nonprofit that advocates for science in everyday lives. My work focuses on equitable and just climate adaptation and resilience measures and policies, and I will be the moderator of this session. Affordable, safe, and energy efficient housing is essential to the livelihood of all populations and is particularly important for low wealth and underserved populations. Housing insecurity undermines employment, health, education, and other crucial elements of a sustainable path out of poverty. The current pandemic has worsened the systemic inequities underlying the country's ongoing housing crisis. Several efforts have attempted to address the challenge, and various federal initiatives in the United States have taken steps to improve the energy efficiency of housing for residents. But such policies often miss low-income households who usually lack the resources needed to take advantage of these programs. So in this session, our panelists will discuss how housing inequities impact communities of color, immigrant communities, and low-wealth populations across the country, and how limited access to affordable, safe, and healthy housing is an environmental justice issue and determinant of the neighborhood health. Additionally, the panelists will describe how populations suffering housing inequity also suffer from energy inequity, which increases their risk of negative climate-related impacts. So thank you everybody for being here again. I will let the panelists introduce themselves. Their full bios are on the symposium website. Please refer to those for the full trajectory of our speakers today. So I'm going to ask each panelist to please tell us about you, your organization, your work, and how your work relates to the theme of this panel. Starting with Daniel, please.
Thank you, Astrid. Still morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel del Pielago. I'm the organizing director with Empower DC. We are a grassroots organizing group in Washington, DC. We've been around for about 20 years, and much of our work has always taken into account the environment and how it affects the communities that we work with. A lot of our work, my work specifically, focuses in around public housing and housing in general. And what we see is horrible living conditions that people are in that, of course, affect not only their physical health, but their mental health. So we've been working, on many fronts, trying to really make that connection and let our city, our elected officials know that, especially with public housing, in the absence of federal funding, we need more local support. But we also work with individual residents, groups of residents rather, to raise their awareness, their ability to advocate for themselves so they can really lead the way in finding the solutions to create better living conditions and a better quality of life for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Next on is Walkiria.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Walkiria Pool. I'm the president and founder of Centro de Apoyo Familiaro, Center for Assistance to Families. We were founded in 2006. We've been working in Prince George's County mainly, dealing with affordable housing, fighting for affordable housing, and making sure that all the low-income families, especially the Latino community, get access to opportunities in housing and also fighting environmental justice. We have been working for the last few years in many issues, and I'm very excited and honored to be here today with the rest of my colleagues this morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Walkiria. Next is Ruth Ann.
Thank you, Astrid, and so good to be with just fabulous people on this panel. I began the journey of environmental justice in 1993 when I was tutoring young kids at the Franciscan Youth Center at 33rd and Greenmount in Baltimore, and came to really understand and realize that the housing conditions that the young people I was spending my time with not only was something that was traumatic to them because they were moving so often, fleeing bad housing conditions, but was impacting the health of themselves and their families. And something that has always mattered to me is to have equal opportunity to all things in life. And we did not have that in Baltimore for our African American and Hispanic children, because in 1993 and today, they were having their brains damaged by lead at an astonishing rate. And so I joined in with the Coalition to End Childhood Lead Poisoning, a mission that had been set out by 9 parents whose children had been highly poisoned by lead, to set forth a policy and set of practices and dig in with the community to lower the rates of lead poisoning. And we've advanced by 99% in lowering that rate of lead poisoning in Baltimore. But what we found is that we had to change housing condition in order to change health and opportunity for the future. And that means looking at the entire structure around asthma, around energy, and around the opportunities that face us today, which is to take climate dollars, redirect them to help us change housing condition, to change the normal from kids getting asthma because of poor indoor air quality or extreme heat and extreme cold, and to be able to use dollars from climate and healthcare as well as government, and to be able to put a new opportunity forward to really put reparations into communities and restorative justice where it matters most, where a kid lays their head down at night has so much to do with what will happen to them the next day, the next year, and the next generation, but also for our older adults to be able to think concretely about equity transfer and intergenerational wealth transfer. So I think we work at the intersection of environmental justice, racial justice, and opportunity, and have since our founding. It's a job I took that I said I would do for 2 years. That was 29 years ago. We continue to want to have impact. And but what we have really focused on since Duke University did a study around the work of GHHI and said we had returned $44.5 billion back to the Maryland economy, was that those dollars were not going back to the communities and to the people who had long been robbed of those opportunities. So we have really recalibrated to track dollars, to be able to put a measurement on equity and health. And I'll talk more about that, but just really excited to be here, especially with my longtime friend, Mary Washington.
Thank you very much. And right on cue, the senator from my state of Maryland, Mary Washington.
Oh, thank you. Again, thank you for that nice handoff. Hi, I'm Maryland State Senator Mary Washington, and I represent the 43rd Legislative District, and it is a pleasure to be here with you again this year. I served my first 8 years in the House of Delegates, and since 2019, I've been a member of the Maryland Senate, where I serve on the Education, Health, and the Environmental Affairs Committee. I also am the Senate Chair for both the Joint Committee on Ending Homelessness and the Joint Committee on Children, Youth, and Families. Of course, I'm on lots of committees, but the two of particular interest and import here is that I'm a member of the newly created Maryland Commission on Health Equity, which I was happy to be the lead sponsor for that bill. And also most recently, just this week, in fact, appointed to the Baltimore Regional Transit Funding and Governance Work Group. So certainly the intersection of transportation and health and the environment are very clear. Earned my PhD in sociology and social demography from Hopkins. I currently teach at the Maryland Institute College of Art. I teach courses on policy, activism, poverty, and applied mathematics. And I've lived in Baltimore. This is my chosen home. I was raised in Philadelphia, but Baltimore is my chosen home for more than 2 decades. And I live in Edna Gardens Lakeside neighborhood with my fiance, Jody. And I enjoy doing as much gardening as I can My work in housing equity, however, I believe is centered on the fact that I am the daughter of 2 healthcare professionals, and I'm the eldest of 6 children. And they instilled in me this relentless pursuit for fairness, for mutual responsibility, and for community service. And over the course of my legislative service, I've championed and secured law and budget in the budget process, services and housing for unaccompanied homeless youth and young people, including tuition exemption waivers for these young people, empowering minors to consent to housing, establish the housing hunger-free campus grant program, the state's first legislation establishing the community schools model as a statewide strategy for addressing concentrated poverty, but also to focus investments in mitigating impacts of divestment and redlining. Again, the connection to housing. Passed a law to make sure that no homeowner or place of worship would lose their home to unpaid water bills. Again, this connects to energy and utilities. And alongside some amazing advocates, banned the practice of shackling pregnant, incarcerated women during labor and delivery. Increased and passed legislation mandating that there be a women's pre-release center, again, connecting to housing and transfer back into the community, and codified definitions and required that we have gender responsiveness services and programming in Maryland's correctional facilities. I am so honored to be here, to be a part of this conversation and to connect all the dots together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So the audience, as you saw, we have some excellent people here. I think our conversation is going to be great. Please, if you have questions, put them in the comments box. If you have a question for a specific panelist, please address to that panelist. Otherwise, it can be a general question. And we're going to start now with the presentations. Each presenter is going to present for about 12 minutes. I will give the 2-minute warning, just like a football game. And we are going to start with Daniel. Daniel, all yours. Take it away.
Thank you. I'm going to share some pictures just to kind of set some of the conditions that we see and that the tenants, public housing residents we work with, live with every day. Some of these are a little shocking. I'm sure we all do similar work and have seen these, but just wanted to give a little heads up as it can be a little triggering. So if I could just have a second to share here. Excuse me 1 second. All righty, here we go. So these are some pictures of public housing residents units. As you can see, huge rodents, mold issues due to water leakages. This hallway, covered in mold when they remove the carpet. You see, because of deferred maintenance, you can see here on the right-hand side, this sink that is just overflowing.
Yeah, we cannot see anything, I don't think.
You're unable to see it?
There it is.
Okay.
There it is. Okay.
Okay, wonderful. As you can see here in the top left, this is, I'm hovering. If you can see my cursor, you can see a rat literally crawling into a pan that somebody is cooking in. You can see the deterioration happening here behind a kitchen unit. Here on the outside, you can see the water damage that is caused because you see, the gutter. I don't even know what you call that, but where the water is supposed to fall off on, not where it's supposed to be, causing, of course, a lot of not just external damage, but also internally. And then here you see a ceiling caving in. So these are the conditions, unfortunately, that we see much too often for public housing residents. And of course, it affects their physical well-being, but also their mental well-being. Just yesterday, I was working with a resident who was displaced because her ceiling caved in. She was put up in a hotel. She was to be relocated to another property. However, she had a lot of trauma there because she had a family member was killed on the property. So that's one of the things that's not taken into consideration in this very kind of like perfunctory process of like, okay, we're just going to move you, right? The housing authority, and it doesn't take into accord to things like that. With some of our advocacy, we were able to help, and she took another unit, and the other unit that she was accepted, was going to be fixed. When she moves in, it's not fixed, and in fact, because she moved her things in and wasn't living there right away, waiting for the maintenance to happen, her house gets broken into and her TV gets stolen. So, she reaches out to me yesterday, literally saying, I want to kill myself. And she has 3 children. So, I share all of this to say that, it's such a deep issue when we have this inequity that exists in housing. Unfortunately, what it appears that we have, and I'm jumping maybe on a soapbox here, but in this capitalist society, we have a sector that is disposable. People who are disposable, it appears. People who we don't really, the larger community decision makers, to a large extent, accept that people live in these conditions, which for us is wrong. And this is why we do this work. We believe that housing is a human right. We believe that people deserve to live in decent, safe housing. So we know when people come to us with these issues, we have to attack it on multiple levels. So as I mentioned, much of our work is focused in and around really just empowering individuals to raise their voice, to say there is something wrong with this, to go to the media, to share with their neighbors, and to create strong groups of organized people that can make a demand and put some power behind that demand. That is easier said than done because, of course, we are working against a very well-financed and well-organized system that actually stands to gain from the pain that people are living in. And I say this because I think, many decades ago, I think what we saw was just, landlords, landowners who just, weren't involved in their properties, right? They didn't care about keeping up the maintenance, it was whatever. But what we're seeing now, as we see the rise of gentrification, and I think I'm oversimplifying these issues, but just to be quick in the presentation, what we're seeing is that there is tons of money to be made. So public housing, for example, is a land grab. So now actually allowing properties to run into the ground creates this public narrative for local governments, for developers who are very involved in local governments to say, we need to do something about this. We cannot let our people live like this. And we need to, we're going to redevelop. And that the HUD, the federal government, is actually doing what they call repositioning, which is essentially getting out of the public housing game. They are either demolishing or partnering with private developers to essentially sell off their properties. So that's what we're seeing here in the district. We're seeing tons of properties for us intentionally being run into the ground. So then there is this excuse and strong narrative that we must do something about it. But what we've seen in practice is that they begin the process of displacement and demolition, but very few people come back. Hope 6, which was a project that the federal government engaged in, a couple decades ago, I guess now, was a failure. It showed that creating these so-called mixed income communities actually didn't benefit people who were displaced. Very few of them came back, and they are actually moved either laterally or worse. And in our work here in the district, we've worked with the Berry Farm neighborhood, which is a historic neighborhood, who's now going on close to 2 decades of a so-called redevelopment, where people have ended up at other public housing properties that are just as bad, that are now slated for redevelopment. So we see this sick cycle of developers really owning this this perpetuation of running down properties, and then at the right moment being able to maximize their profits, as it were. So our work really has been to raise up the issues. First of all, we do very simple things like take pictures. Like, these are all pictures taken by residents. This was not us going out taking pictures, but people documenting their issues. We use social media. We have our own radio show here in the district on WPFW, where we create a platform for residents to speak about these issues. Not just that, but we certainly make space for that. We engage in all of the civic processes, the oversight hearings of our city council, the budget hearings for our city every year, and then anything pertinent. Our housing authority has monthly meetings. We make sure we are there raising up these issues. As I mentioned, unfortunately, this is tough work in the sense that I get paid to do this, and that makes my skin a little thicker in the sense of being able to deal with it. But directly affected people do not get paid by this. They just have to bear the brunt of all of this. So for us, it really is creating, trying to organize in large groups as much as possible, so it does not all fall on one person. But that's hard because people aren't low-income people are not only affected by housing issues. There's a myriad of issues that they are affected by. So that is sometimes the tension that we have, is how do we fight these long fights that we have to engage in with people who are already living in trauma, people who are already living in very serious conditions. With that said, have had some success. We've won some significant amount of money from our city council investing in public housing repairs for this upcoming year. We expect to get about 50 million, which is the most we've ever seen. However, how it's spent and what it's spent on is the next fight. But we'll certainly engage our base, our folks in that fight. But once again, I think the biggest issue right now for us is that there is such a financial incentive in getting access to land, and a proven way to do that is to allow it to run down. So that's where we see the nexus between environment and how it really does push people to self-evict, essentially, to take themselves out of the equation by either becoming homeless or moving somewhere else. So we do have quite a big fight that we need to continue to fight. Fortunately, there are people that still believe that this is wrong, and that organized people can have an effect. So we continue to do that. We're always looking for different ways. We're looking at legal options. We're looking at how else can we pressure our housing authority, our local government, just to care a little bit more. And I hate to simplify it that way, but oftentimes it just does. It makes one think very clearly that some people just don't care. That there are people there that don't care, and that once again there are people that are disposable. There are people that can be sacrificed. So everything else looks good. I will leave it at that. If people have any questions, please feel free to ask. I'm sure there'll be a period for that. But yeah, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Anya. And I'd like to highlight the issue of the mental health. When you mentioned that this person said, I just want to kill myself. People, a lot of times, they don't think about the mental health and the impacts on the mental health. It's just the health, the modes, the problems that they have, the asthma, but the mental health has become a really huge issue. So thank you for that. Next on, we have Walkiria. Please take it away.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Walkiria Pool, as it was mentioned, from Centro de Apoyo Familiar CAF. And I will go really quick on this slide because I really want to just educate you on some of the issues that are happening, especially with the Latino community, undocumented families. And so I'll go to the next slide. Whoever is moving on, I don't know if I'm supposed to. Yeah, thank you. So just a little bit about the history of CAF. We founded the organization in 2006 in the state of Massachusetts, not too far from where you are, Senator, right now, close to New Hampshire. That's why, it's a beautiful place. But yeah, we started the organization there, and in '09 we expanded here to the state of Maryland. And it was mainly because of the wave of the housing crisis. I had just moved into the state, and one of the things I found is the need of bilingual services, especially in the field of housing. We expanded in 2017 into the Northern Virginia. We had a small office over there just because most of the people were coming all the way to Maryland to seek for help, because that's how many of the Latino community works. They go where they can find the bilingual service and they get referred. And just recently we were able to open an office in DC. We already had approved counseling agency. We work very, very closely with churches. We got over 250 churches that we work with, and they help us to do a lot of the outreach to the underserved community. We can go to the next slide. Um, Thank you. Some of the programs that we do is pre-purchase counseling. We do a lot of work helping people to get into home ownership. Now we all know that home ownership is a very serious stuff, and if you don't do it correctly, if you don't get educated, what's going to happen is that we're gonna see happening what happened a lot in 2009. A lot of the people that came to the office, they said, I had no idea what I was signing. Nobody told me the small prints. I didn't know. So a lot of the people that were getting close to be foreclosed, that was the reason why. I had no idea. So we focus on in a lot of prevention, a lot of foreclosure prevention through homeownership education, also through financial literacy, making sure people understand how to manage their money. We just went through the COVID, and there's been so much, but when the people were getting the government stimulus, some of the things that we focus in a lot of these people, let's see let's help you manage this little bit of money, because if you know how to administer that little bit, you're going to be able to do to administer more. So we do a lot of financial literacy with everyone that we can work with, credit rebuilding, foreclosure prevention. And I'm gonna make a parenthesis right here on that, of the foreclosure prevention piece. We're starting to see a lot of families now going into foreclosure, believe it or not. And the piece that Daniel mentioned about mental health is getting to that point where we're getting a lot of people about suicidal. This is exactly what they said to us that they're gonna do. In 2009, 2010, when we went through that crisis, people were not so desperate. They were desperate, but now there's another layer. People are more sensitive. We just went through COVID. They have lost family. They have lost everything. And so we have to deal with so many mental and emotional issues that are going on. And adding that layer, now people are about to lose their home is being critical. So just this week, we were talking about in my office, we need to completely get educated how to deal with these people. We just been referring them because the minute that we hear somebody saying, I'm gonna kill myself, you cannot leave it with like, oh wow, no, don't do it. But we're trying to refer them to the 1-800 where people can get access to professional. But we see it is happening everywhere, and the crisis is coming to the point that it's very silent, but it's happening. And those who are like us, we are in the front line of this work. We see it happening, and it is very stressful because a lot of us, when we work with a client, you cannot just let it go. You just feel that until the issue is not resolved, um, that is in the back of your head, and you keep working and trying to find a solution. We do a lot of work with rental counseling, which we all know that's another issue. A lot of the people, who cannot afford to pay the rent because they out of work, they don't have a job. And of course, we do other works that are related to healthy family, food distribution. We've been doing food distribution since 2014 with the support of, some amazing contributors who are able to help us, and also through the partnership that we have with the churches that every weekend are serving over 300 people to feed them here in Prince George's County. And also environmental health education. We find that is huge in our community, especially the Latino community. There is so much need of education on the environmental health. There's a lot of need of being empowered. And also, as Daniel was saying, we need to help them to speak up, because the pictures that he just showed, a lot of our families are going through that, especially in the rental field. And a lot of them, because they immigrants, sometimes they undocumented, they want to keep silence because they say, what if I say something, they're gonna report me. And so there's a lot of these issues that we need to work with and make sure that people have the freedom and the power and the support to be able to get the resources, to get the organizations where to go to, but also to be able to speak up. And so I'll go to the next slide just very quick, because I want to share some points with you. The CAF Connectors Network, we got over, as I mentioned, over 200 churches that we work with. Every year, we're able to serve over 15,000 families. That is through the work of the promotoras, which we also do. We do a lot of training, with promotoras, with the promoters. We do a lot of work with leadership development. We make sure that we can provide a holistic approach in our community and be able to have a successful outreach whenever we do. We can go to the next slide. With the promotora specifically, we try to ensure that they are community educators, but one of my goals in the organization as well is to be able to help these community educators to become organizers. We're lacking organizers in our community. We're lacking people to be trained properly and be able to serve as the voice that we need to have in our community, so they can talk about different issues. And it is, our goal to be able to empower them in such a way that they can also sit down on the tables when decisions are okay, thank you for letting me know. So we need to make sure that there is, these issues are brought up into the community. They can be sitting the table and can be listened. I want to make sure that to let me know if everything, you can hear me okay, if I have to slow down. So just let me know. So this is what we do a lot with the work of the promotoras, and which has been very and continually very successful. The next slide. Yeah. So while with the next slide, I want to, when we go to the next slide, sorry for the difficulty. So these are just where we are, but I want to mention a little bit on some of the main issues that are also happening here in the state. We now have a large wave of undocumented, a lot of people who doesn't have a house. And one of the things that we see happening is sometimes This family have children. They don't know where to go. We've been getting a lot of phone calls, people sleeping at the airport, staying there, because they don't know where to go. And I've been very grateful for the work that we have been able to do with some of especially the local churches. They have been able to help us a lot, because every time we get these phone calls, again, you cannot ignore that. You need to find a solution. You need to get a place to these people. Sometimes we have to fundraise money to get them in a hotel for 3 or 4 days until we're able to find a location. But then when you see them happening, showing up to your office with little children, you're like, okay. And so this is why we realize this is a work that has to be done in partnership. We need the local officials, we need the community, we need the leaders, we need everybody to step in and help us to work together to ensure that we can solve this issue. We need pro bono attorneys. A lot of these families are in need of that. And so it is my goal. We can go to the last slide so people can have my information. But there's a lot going on, and we need to fight this, and we need to do it together. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity and for the work that Dr. Wilson has been doing, and for being able to help us participate in this symposium this year. So thank you.
Thank you so much. This was very good. We need a lot of people like you and your organization. When you mentioned the undocumented people and housing issues, I was reminded. I work with hurricanes. Most of the work that I do relates to hurricanes and hurricane impacts. And I remember that after Hurricane Harvey, lots of undocumented families would not seek help because they were afraid of the consequences. So, and also a lot of people undocumented went from place to place looking for work. And of course, they were exploited because they were undocumented, and people were needing workers to fix houses, to do all kinds of things. So there is that issue also of environmental justice related to the immigration status of a lot of people, not only related to housing, but of course work. As you mentioned, some people get out of a job and don't have how to pay for their housing or other expenses. Thank you so much, Walkiria. Next, we have Ruth Han. Take it away.
Thank you. I'm going to try to share my screen here. Please let me know if you can see the slides. If you cannot, can you see them now? Yeah?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Great. So I have been really interested to see the work of our presenters so far. And as I said at the beginning of, let me see if I can make sure my slides will move here for me, though. That's a bigger issue. Hold on 1 second. Uh-oh, there we go. Let's see. They don't seem to be moving. I don't know why. Hold on just a second. Let me see if I can, there, let go. So my organization, and the organization I've spent 29 years with, is the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. We began as Parents Against Lead in 1986, founded by 9 parents whose children were highly poisoned by lead, and they found themselves meeting each other in the Johns Hopkins Pediatric Intensive Care Unit. Those families lived within 2 blocks of each other, the 800 and 900 block of North Washington Street, for those who know Baltimore, which is in the shadow of Johns Hopkins Hospital and the Bloomberg School of Public Health. And so the housing condition and the juxtaposition against healthcare was quite stark. But out of that meeting, they set forward a path for us to work on breaking the link between unhealthy housing and unhealthy families. Almost 30 years later, or more than 30 years later, we work across the nation and define our work as addressing social and structural determinants of health to advance health opportunity and racial equity. We were founded as an environmental justice and racial justice organization, but our aim actually remains the same today, and that is around the 30+ million families that wake up every day in unhealthy housing, beset by housing conditions that often relate to energy efficiency and poor weatherization, homes where they live in extreme heat and extreme cold. And the offsets of that are chipping, peeling, and flaking paint put on decades ago that have left a toxic legacy of lead poisoning, not just in Baltimore, but throughout our state and throughout our nation, that damages brains, kidneys, and hearts, and has a long impact on the ability to earn and compete and the ability to maintain societal norms, in effect, much related to crime and other factors out of lead poisoning. But coupled with that is asthma from mold, mildew, and moisture. Daniel was talking about this earlier, and the impact that has on school attendance and on families and the cost of the opportunity costs faced, not only by children, but adults and older adults. Those same homes with the housing conditions that have trip and fall injuries that are avoidable if the structural work was done, and the energy work that is much needed. And all of this comes from the disinvestment, from ill-conceived and unjust policies of how we applied housing code standards and how we applied investment. So this set of health impacts is what we focus on, and how do we turn that into an opportunity to change the standard that we allow in our lowest income neighborhoods to bring forth dignity and health and opportunity. And one of the aspects that we're looking at today as we have evolved in our work is not only energy efficiency and weatherization, but we're adding to that work things like solar and decarbonization and electrification. But while we're doing this, where we know there will be enormous health opportunities that I'll talk about, we're also looking at what is the economic impact of making these investments over the long term. Meaning, will families pay a higher rate of electricity because we electrify their homes? And if so, how do we make sure we build the right policies that will be the cushion or the ability to make the right changes for health and climate, but not harm communities that we've spent generations harming? You know, with the global population, right, we have 40% of buildings that are polluting and causing respiratory disease. That translates to 34 million households in America, and 26 million of those are below 80% of area median income. You know, on the issue of lead poisoning, the 1.1 million families with known lead hazards, according to the American Healthy Housing Survey, equally to the energy issues, that's $170 billion of costs that we need to move out of that cost into opportunity for the future. And these are the things that we're focused on. And as I said, we've added into our work around lead, where we began, in asthma and injury and energy efficiency. We are really focused on how do we bring decarbonization properly into communities, understanding that all of us, it's a hard thing to ask people to give up gas stoves, you know, for cooking reasons, for cultural reasons, but also for many of the families we serve, it's the gas stove that has gotten them through the winter when the electricity has gone out. So having to figure out those issues and address them in a way that is equitable. And in fact, we wrote a paper that, if those may be interested or listening, called Leading with Equity on energy efficiency, and I could post that to the chat, that I think is really important and has really helped to define some of the work we're doing federally around low-income heating, the Inflation Reduction Act, and even the building or bipartisan infrastructure, to think about, at its core, health and safety as we think about affordable housing, and as we think about environmental and climate-related issues. Because even the gas stove alone in a home can increase the rate of respiratory diseases by 42%. And really, for children, a 32% increase over what is already an epidemic affecting their ability to go to work, or to go to school, affecting their health abilities. And these housing conditions, I was so glad to hear it mentioned earlier, have such a tremendous impact on mental health, on emotional health, and on the ability around holistically health opportunities. The way that we approach work at GHHI is to bring all sectors of funding together into an aligned stream of funding to maximize what goes into families' homes. No family who's in distress, who's trying to just keep the job and take care of their kids, trying to find transportation to get to work, and trying to deal with sometimes overwhelming housing condition should have to figure out if they're 80% of median income or 200% of poverty. If your child's on WIC, you're on TANF, if you are attending a federally qualified health center, and other factors that are indicators of low income, we should not make it hard to access the myriad of resources that are actually available and need to be better delivered. And we got into this work to align, braid, and coordinate these resources at the community level to create community-based jobs and ownership of the work, but also to ensure that we are maximizing how we spend this money. By aligning these resources together, we save 25% at the government level, but we save lots of headaches for families. And in fact, if we don't do it for those dollars around weatherization and energy, over 50% of the time in cities like Detroit and Baltimore, we will defer and decline a family because of the other issues of health and safety: mold, mildew, moisture, lead, structural defects. So it's so critical to do this. But another factor in this is by having those combined skills in a contractor. According to the Center for Employment Opportunity, who looked at our work in Buffalo, New York, we will start contractors at a $4,000 to $8,000 level higher, most of those jobs coming from community. One of the things that may be of interest is that we have worked very hard to say, what is the opportunity to define the value of really going into our hardest hit communities and doing the work that is necessary for reparations, for restorative justice, for environmental justice, to make housing healthy and stable. Well, it actually has a big, big benefit for healthcare on cost savings. And so we've launched a number of projects with healthcare to invest, not only a $100 million investment with ProMedica in 7 cities, where we are doing a large demonstration project of how do we hire, how do we build wealth, what are the racial equity impacts, what are the healthcare impacts that can help move health policy, so that in places where we've worked in California to help to change the Medicaid statute so that doctors today in California can write a script to have a house assessed and to provide up to $7,500 over the lifetime of that person toward making that house healthier for asthma. Or in other places like in New York, where we've invested money in the Bronx to make housing healthier, and all of the payback for the money that we've invested is coming back through Medicaid savings. We're doing that here in Baltimore in many ways, but one is a 1,000-unit launch that we're doing with ProMedica and other philanthropy and government. And in it, we will do weatherization and cool roofs and solar and decarbonization, along with asthma reduction, along with fall prevention, and along with lead, so that we're building not only that health now, but the opportunity, especially in the African American and Hispanic communities, the opportunity for intergenerational wealth transfer, for skill building, and for ownership. We have a number of other programs that we run at GHHI in trying to walk the walk for all the talk that we have on health and equity. And one of those is housing upgrade benefits to seniors, where we're looking specifically on how do we help low-income homeowners retain their house, retain their health, and retain their dignity, and be able to have that home as a real estate asset to transfer to future generations, closing the gap that exists between the white community and the African American and Hispanic communities on intergenerational wealth transfer. We have programs around asthma, around lead, around weatherization, all of it moving public policy and building cross-sector partnerships. Across the nation, the work that we do is to build the capacity of governors and mayors' offices in partnership with frontline service providers and ensuring that they can capture healthcare investment, government investment, and investment of climate dollars to make homes holistically healthy. Here's some small facts around how it works. In Baltimore, we've reduced lead poisoning by 99%, returning what Duke University says is a $44.5 billion return to the state of Maryland. But we now need to really focus on how do we return those dollars to who's been harmed and how do we lift communities. But in our work, we've also shown a 66% reduction in hospitalizations in Baltimore. And I think key in our goal to level the playing field in the classroom, by doing this holistic work, we've also increased school attendance among the families that we've served by 62%. That kids are in the classroom, their brains are healthy, they can breathe, they can be there, they can pay attention. In the studies we've done for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, it's also shown that our work helps to improve work attendance by 88%. We've lowered Medicaid costs, we've improved energy costs, but we've also been measuring this through community voice, measuring data around racial equity impact and earnings, and having a number of outside evaluations that are done with community data collection, with community input on the evaluation, and with the benefits driving more to community. So I'll stop there only to say that one of the things we're going to be working on in the legislature, for those who may be inclined to want to advocate with us, is a bill that Governor Hogan vetoed on Memorial Weekend. And that is to level the playing field on energy efficiency for low-income families, especially with the millions, tens of millions of dollars that we'll be getting from new federal programs into Maryland. Very low-income families pay into the Empower Fund as the rest of us do who have energy provision here in Maryland, except for they do not benefit at the same rate that they pay in reinvestment from the state around energy efficiency and weatherization. So Laura Charkoudian, a colleague of Senator Washington's, and Senator Brian Feldman have a bill that would fix that would set out a guideline, that would place a priority on our lowest income families of need, and to ensure that at the very least, we proportionally and fairly and equitably invest our energy resources. I will end that there, and here's how you can be in touch with us. And please follow us on Twitter at Healthy Housing and any of our other channels. And I'm happy to answer questions at the end of this. And thank you.
Thank you so much. And without delay, we go to Senator Washington.
Well, that's my last slide. So we might want to start it. Here we go. You can actually, good afternoon, everyone. Slide number 2. We all know where we're here, and just wonderful to be here and be an invitee. I will just jump right to slide 3 if we could. And that is just speaking directly about the connection between health and housing. So as I said before, I chair a few committees, also have some background in public health and just a general interest in the broad area of equity. But time and time again, we do continue to come to this connection between health and housing. And in particular, while there are 4 groups that we find in our legislation, in our policy needs, in the public reporting to us and testifying, as was said here, low-income families, children, and older adults are disproportionately impacted, as well as racial and ethnic minorities and individuals of immigrant status and renters. And one of the things that isn't often spoken about, it has to do, of course, with housing and security, and in fact, multiple moves. Moving more than 3 times a year is associated with negative housing, healthcare costs for children, and they're all more likely to have poor health conditions. And so you can see in this slide around what drives a person's health. So the environment, right? There's their housing, air quality, all those things, behavior that was raised. Typically, it's thought of and dealt with in the terms of doing, your tobacco use, alcohol use, and socioeconomic factors. I'm going to focus a little bit on more of the socioeconomic factors related to housing and equity. Slide 4. So first of all, if we just go back and look at a national level, Maryland has a very high cost of living, right? It's 8.4% more expensive than the average housing costs. And we rank 6th as the most expensive state. Next slide. However, within our state, there is disparity in individuals' ability to afford that expensive housing, right? So as you can see in the chart, over time, incomes for all have gone up some, taken some dips, but Maryland, Baltimore City is having a little bit of a dip now. But over time, the average income median income has raised. However, even within the state of Maryland, there is a huge disparity between $86,000 median income for the state as a whole compared to Baltimore City's median household income of $50,000. So that means at household, not an individual, that 50% of the people make more than $50,000 and 50% of the people make less than. But you see that huge gap there. And it's worth noting that a third of Baltimore households have zero net worth. So just so that is all you own, all your assets, minus all of your debts. When we're talking about Baltimore City, a third of people have zero wealth. So in terms of resiliency, ability to support each other, support families when problems or difficult times arise, many families, many households have no ability to garner against problems and challenges. Next slide. So again, to dive sort of deeper into, we saw the disparities in wages and household income. In Baltimore, it costs more. So the average rent for an apartment is higher in Baltimore than it is for the state as a whole. And certainly there are regional differences. If we compare to Montgomery County and Prince George's County, there's differences, but it's higher. But Baltimore City, again, in relative to the income, it is much higher, as is the cost of a single family home and then renting a home over time. Next slide. So the results of both the disparities, the high cost of living in Maryland and in Baltimore City, and the high cost of the disparities in wages, there are a lot of impacts, but there's 4 I want to draw to your attention and that I think we should be focusing on our solutions. That there's disparities in home ownership and housing stability, right? The stability of your home ownership, the cycle of eviction that many renters find themselves in, a cycle of housing insecurity where people are unstably housed, moving from place to place. They have a place, but they may live with a family member or live somewhere. So they don't qualify as homeless or completely unhoused, but their housing is not stable. And then there are a class of people who are chronically unstably housed and homeless, including some very young adults and our seniors. The next slide, please. So if we're going to take a look at the disparities in housing security and stabilization, you see that in the Baltimore region, there is a large concentration of where there's the highest need. So this slide shows you in the greater Baltimore region where the need is to have more stable home ownership. And you see, again, in Baltimore City and parts of the county, I'm sorry we didn't go into Prince George's. I'm sure we see that as well. But this shows that there's areas where there's low need, where there's moderate need, but the highest need is centered right in the Baltimore region. And we must look at what we can do to maintain home ownership, but also the stability of home ownership. Next slide. The next slide also addresses the cycle of housing insecurity. And many researchers have looked at this, but you have this cycle of you don't pay your rent, you get evicted, you're homeless, can be health problems, but as you can see, there's a reciprocal relationship between those. You can't work, you have some health problems, so there's a disruption in your work. Therefore, then you have a loss of income. And then a non-payment of rent, and that is this cycle. So in Maryland, based on the PIC count, there are about 6,500 people who are identified as homeless, but also within that population are people who find themselves in this eviction cycle as well, and that these are families, these are veterans, these are unaccompanied adults, and there are individuals, again, just only 1,000 of these 6,000 are identified as chronically homeless. Therefore, 5,000 or more are in this cycle of housing insecurity. Next slide, please. So I just want to say we are making some progress in this area that we report out in the Joint Committee on Ending Homelessness that have been reported to us from our state agencies and our partners. The establishment of rental assistance programs, some funds to particularly in addressing the needs that were caused by COVID, providing funds for tenants to use as a result of COVID. They could get up to 12 months of arrears, as well as some prospective assistance, emergency solutions grants. We need to rapidly increase permanent housing placements out of shelter. So again, not just a cycle of being temporarily housed, but how do we get permanent housing placements for people? How can we decompress the shelters? How do we use hotels that we're beginning to look at? The use of hotels and motels as alternative sites. Also, we've passed specifically some legislation around addressing and ending youth homelessness, dedicated funding for youth-related specific rapid rehousing, for case management and motel and hotel placement, host homes, and technical assistance for developing youth homelessness plans. We found over the last 10 years that when I first began doing this work 10 years ago, we were really not at all, as a nation and as a state, coming to grips with the fact that we have many young people, 12, 14, 15, 16, who are not under the care of the state and not under the care of a parent, but on their own. And so we needed to develop specific policies and specific programs to allow them to be housed. And again, a tremendous amount of street outreach, but we still need to do more. Next slide. And again, we passed some, these are just some of the bills. I won't go into the detail, but those are some of the specific bills that we passed in this area, and I'm happy to share that with you later. Next slide. On to solutions, right? So we absolutely, we need to, and other cities, we need policies to address the inadequate and unaffordable housing. We need to transform, again, underutilized space into affordable housing, expand emergency and rental assistance programs. We need to realign our state and local housing expenditures to meet the critical needs. We are not spending the money that is needed. And I'm so happy to hear all of you, we're all of the same accord that we are a wealthy state. But given the additional investments from the federal government, we not just an incremental increase, we need to increase our expenditures by 10 times. So if a program is currently being funded at $3 million, it needs to be funded at $30 million. And again, these are all some solutions that we should advocate for national policies as well that specifically address racial disparities in home ownerships. We need to increase tenant protections and access to information and legal services and mediation, extend the affordability periods associated with some development subsidies. Part of what Daniel was raising about the privatization of housing, many of these agreements are only for 10 years. That is very, very dangerous for the stability of these communities. I mean, if you're in senior housing and you're 65 and 70, by the time you're 75 or 80, when you're most vulnerable and least able to work, you will be out on the street. You have to come up with a fair market rate, or have to find other housing. Again, thank you all so much for this. I'm excited for the questions. And again, as always, look forward to being a voice and an advocate with all of you in Annapolis or anywhere you need. Thank you. Oh, please keep in touch.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, beautiful Annapolis. I love that. So interestingly, we have no questions as of yet, but take advantage of that. This session is about housing access, affordability, and energy. And we have not talked too much about energy. So I'd like to get your take on the importance of energy access in the broader discussion of housing. And also if you have any insights on initiatives that have been put forward, try to help energy access, but that usually leave behind low wealth and the environmental justice community.
So I'm going to feel like the biggest failure in the world, because that's exactly what we're doing and what I hoped I was trying to explain, which is to ensure that every low income, under-resourced family and low-wealth family in the state of Maryland has access to healthy and energy-efficient housing. And I think, Astrid, about a decade and a half ago, when President Obama asked and Vice President Biden gave us a grant and asked us to lift our local work to national influence to bring the sectors of climate and energy, healthcare, and healthy housing together. We began that work around energy efficiency and access to energy efficiency because we were making houses lead safe and healthy, but not energy efficient. And, I talked about that $44.5 billion moment when I thought, Duke thought that we were going to stand up and cheer. And as a North Carolina graduate, always hard to cheer Duke, but I have to acknowledge the study. But it was the moment that the light bulb went on that we really, as much as we thought we were fighting for racial justice and environmental justice, we had to bring energy access and energy efficiency into play and change laws. So what have we done about that? At the federal level, we've expanded health and safety to work with weatherization so we don't defer and decline families, and they have better access and they don't have to hunt and peck for those resources. We've expanded that to our elderly. We've helped DOE think about how do you do pre-weatherization work, structural work in houses that are so in disrepair in order for them to get access to the energy efficiency programs. But what we're also doing is redirecting the massive dollars that are in the marketplace for climate, right? And all of our wonderfully great-minded billionaires who want to invest in this, or other philanthropy who wants to invest in this, as well as government. And to say the big opportunity is to lead with our lowest income communities in our climate change efforts to connect with human beings and how it affects their health is at home, right? Where we have to make houses resilient against flooding. We have to understand the massive health impacts of high heat in housing. We built generations of public housing without proper ventilation, without proper cooling. You know, we talk about our schools, but we have to also talk about our homes. Heat kills. It destroys cellular development. It has big impacts on health, and it has big impacts on mortality. So we are fighting that fight along with Daniel and Mary and Walkiria here around this effort. And you know what we're trying to lift up is that healthcare should ensure that when they invest in social determinants of health, that climate and energy is part of what they will invest in. And it is often, you know, around asthma, you'll see it. But our partnership with ProMedica, our partnership with Molina Health, our partnership with AmeriGroup are all around indoor air quality, energy efficiency, improving that access, because energy is an important factor in health. So I just wanted to jump in to say I should get fired if you didn't understand that at the beginning. But I want to keep doing the work, so hopefully I won't get fired today.
I did understand that, but you were the one who mentioned it, and I wanted
Yes.
to hear the take of our other panelists also.
Well, you can give me an opportunity. I didn't mean to bury the lead, but as some of where I was going with just the costs, and I should have made more specifically around the fact that Black and Latinx households have an excess energy burden of 42 to 68%, right, respectively. And if we would eliminate, and these extra burdens would be eliminated if we made homes energy efficient, right? But additionally, the next connection would be that improving energy and water efficiency in buildings is also a strategy for preserving existing affordable rentals, right? And also energy efficiency upgrades, they could result in significant financial savings that could then be reinvested into property improvements. Again, with the work that Daniel is doing, say, hey, if we make these energy efficient, then we can invest and make this housing much more affordable. I have a history in that around some of my early work in this area of energy was with the Baltimore Energy Challenge. And again, Ruth was a partner with that. And that was specifically targeting low-income houses who have larger energy bills, and also have the larger burden of the equity impacts to try to make their houses and energy use more sustainable. But also, specifically working to lower those costs. Now, what doesn't work as well for low-income communities, and we found this, are tax credits, right, that are offered for purchasing efficient appliances or for making home renovations. Replacing a furnace can be $3,800 to $10,000. And of course, many low-income homes can't do that. So doing these types of sustainability programs that we all support require a considerable financial investments. So some of the work that Baltimore Energy Challenge did, well, you wrap the furnace, right? And you could do other adaptive things to help improve energy efficiency. So we should invest more in addition to doing tax credits, we need to invest in actual programs that give people the tools they need to make their homes energy efficient, and also straight up grants to do some of the work that's needed to repair their homes. So again, sorry I didn't make that connection, but
no, but that's what I'm here for, to ask.
Yes, that's your job. You're the moderator.
Yeah, no, and I would like to hear from Walkiria and then from Daniel a little bit also about the access to energy and policies to prevent that overburden of low-income communities that they have with energy access.
Yeah, well, yes, I think that I will echo what Senator I was mentioning, because a lot of these programs, they're not friendly for our people. We have to, will be great to work with the local nonprofits to help, in um, to work directly with those families. We've been talking a lot with a lot of our promotoras on the issue of climate change. And so these are some of the topics that we bring about energy, and so how can, what can be done? They come with the questions now, how can we save energy? How can it be done? And of course, we give them a lot of tips and information, but I think we have to make it more friendly for our communities. And we need to start creating more grassroots programs that are targeted in the communities that we're serving and that are more accessible and community friendly.
Yeah, no, I'll just add, um, this is complicated work. And oftentimes when we are in these fights, for example, in a redevelopment property where there is the opportunity, let's rebuild better, right? Let's rebuild with being more energy efficient. Oftentimes residents get caught up with, am I going to be able to return? All of these kind of very basic issues that stop us from looking at the big picture. We've worked with architects to do more planning, deeper planning than what oftentimes cities or developers will engage residents on. Like, for example, we've been like, who should return first? Should it be the seniors? Should it be, or what kind of countertops do you want? And that's the kind of input that is, very soft, very, like, let's just go through these motions. And I would just urge, like, I love being part of these panels just because I'm learning as well. And I would urge those younger people who are in the audience who will replace all of us on this panel to begin thinking that way, right? How do we diversify and create more support for residents, for directly affected people, to look at the bigger picture and to be able to be conversant in these issues, because it is a lot. It's quite a lot when you're facing a big redevelopment coming down. But certainly something that we are trying to fold into our work and make sure that residents are aware of.
Hey, Astrid, I see the question from Ivan on the screen and his
I
comment.
was about to ask it. So how do people get electricity upgrades? Thank you.
Yep. But I wanted to particularly come to his comment that people may or may not see around the cost of the upgrade, right? We want to move people to, this is where I was getting at, what's the economic burden that we actually create with the opportunity to make people healthier, make them more stable, right? There's a big benefit to that, but there is a base cost that we have to understand. And we are at a crossroads right now with money coming from the Inflation Reduction Act, the building up the bipartisan infrastructure, and ARPA. This is a great use of ARPA money, right? This to say we've got to also upgrade the electric in housing. That needs to happen. And in fact, GHHI is running on behalf of the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities a new kind of structure for whole house investment by the state of New Jersey, where Phil Murphy just has put hundreds of millions of dollars into toxics removal, but also with a bent to ensure the alignment between energy efficiency, toxic removal, and healthy housing. And this is specifically what we're trying to get at, is that when we electrify housing, we have to be prepared to use government and private sector dollars to do those electric upgrades.
Thank you. We have 1 minute to go, and I've been asked to keep the time because we're going to have only a 30-minute break for lunch before going into the next concurrent sessions. So I appreciate you answering that one question, Ruth Ann. I'm glad we got at least one question from the audience. And I'd like to thank our panelists for being here. We really appreciate your expertise, and most of all, we appreciate all the work that you do for the people who most need it. So keep up the good fight, keep up the good work, And I will see you next time. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.